Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something really critical. The connection between, well, how we pay teachers and the quality of education, specifically looking at Oklahoma.
Mm.
And for you listening, if you want to get up to speed quickly, really understand an issue without getting bogged down, that's what this deep dive is all about, making complex stuff clear and honestly pretty interesting.
Exactly. We've gone through a whole load of articles, research, all focused on Oklahoma teacher pay, education analysis,
hmm
trying to pull out the key stuff. Our mission today is really to cut through the noise. What are the real challenges? What are the potential solutions for Oklahoma's schools?
And here's something that jumps right out. Oklahoma ranks, well, near the bottom nationally for how much it spends per student, 49th for 2023-24. But at the same time, the state has this huge teacher pay penalty, almost 32% in 2023. So the big question we're unpacking is, how do these things connect? And, what does it mean for kids in classrooms?
Yeah, it's a crucial question. Okay, so maybe let's start broad. Why does teacher pay matter anyway, just nationally speaking?
Good starting point.
Well, there's this economic idea, efficiency wages. Basically, paying people more, maybe more than the bare minimum, can actually be smart business. For teaching, it means maybe you attract better candidates, people stick around longer, maybe they even, work a bit harder or smarter. It's thinking about salaries not just as a cost, but as an investment in people. And teacher quality. That's probably the biggest school factor in how much kids learn.
Right, so it's foundational, not just a perk. And you mentioned that term teacher pay penalty. What exactly is that?
Simply put, it's the wage gap. It compares what teachers earn to what other professionals with similar education and experience make. Nationally, in 2023, teachers earned about 26.6% less. On average, that's quite a gap.
26%. That's definitely enough to make someone think twice about going into teaching or staying in it.
Yeah.
Is there solid proof that paying more actually helps students do better?
Yeah, there's definitely research pointing that way.
Mhm.
Multiple studies show a link between higher base salaries for teachers and better student test scores, in math, English, the core subjects. Some research even hints it could help close achievement gaps between different groups of students, which is obviously huge.
That equity piece is really important.
Right.
Okay, but what about things like merit pay? Paying teachers based on performance. How does that fit in?
Merit pay, it's more complicated. The research suggests it can work, but it really, really depends on how it's designed.
Yeah.
The bonuses have to be big enough to actually motivate someone, right?
Yeah.
And you can't just base it on one test score. You need multiple ways to measure how effective a teacher is.
Makes sense.
We've seen programs try it, like in Dallas with their TEI and AC initiatives, or the Teacher Advancement Program, TAP. Some showed promise. But keeping them going long-term, making them sustainable, that's been a real challenge.
So it sounds like a good base salary is maybe the bedrock, and then maybe well-designed performance pay could add something on top, but it's tricky. And just getting people into teaching in the first place, competitive pay has to matter there, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's huge for recruitment and retention. Keeping good teachers is just as important as finding them. We saw in Mississippi, actually, when they raised teacher salaries significantly, enrollment in their teacher training programs went up noticeably.
Interesting. So if the money isn't there, it's just harder all around. Okay, so that national picture gives us some important context. Let's zoom into Oklahoma now. What do the numbers look like there specifically for teacher pay?
Right, Oklahoma. So for the 2023-24 school year, the average starting salary was $41,152. I put them 45th nationally. The average salary overall was a bit higher, $61,330, ranking 35th. Now, they did have a big jump percentage-wise from the year before, like 10.5%.
But starting from so low, it didn't close the gap.
Exactly. The dollar gap compared to national averages was still pretty wide.
And that teacher pay penalty we talked about. How does Oklahoma stack up against the national 26.6%?
It's worse, actually. Significantly worse. In 2023, Oklahoma's pay penalty was 31.8%. So Oklahoma teachers earning nearly a third less than other professionals in the state with similar qualifications. And one source noted it's especially bad when you compare them to folks in the energy sector there. Big competition for talent.
Wow, almost 32%. That's stark. And how does that starting salary around $41,000 compare to just, the cost of living in Oklahoma?
That's a really critical question. Oklahoma's cost of living is lower than many places, that's true. But even so, when you look at estimates for a basic living wage, especially for someone supporting a child, like one estimate for 2023 in the cheapest metro area was over $60,000 for one adult and one kid. That's way above the starting teacher salary.
So even with the lower cost of living, it's a real struggle for many starting teachers, especially if they have kids. And didn't I read somewhere that a fair number of Oklahoma teachers have second jobs?
Yeah, that's right. In the 2020-21 school year, it was over 15%,
Yeah.
holding down other jobs just to make ends meet. It really paints a picture of the financial pressure, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, so the financial side is tough for teachers. Let's flip to the other side. Student outcomes. How are Oklahoma students doing academically?
Looking at the NAEP scores from 2024, that's the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the nation's report card, Oklahoma's 4th and 8th graders were scoring below the national average pretty consistently in both reading and math. For example, in 4th grade reading, almost half, 46%, were below the NAEP basic level.
Yeah.
That's concerning. And 8th grade reading wasn't much better, 41% below basic. Their state rankings aren't great either.
Those are worrying numbers. What about things like the ACT, college readiness?
Also seeing a bit of a downward trend there. The average ACT score in Oklahoma went from 19.3 back in 2018 down to 17.6 in 2024. So yeah, suggesting maybe students are less prepared for college work overall.
And graduation rates from high school? Any bright spots there?
It's a bit mixed, depending on how you measure it. The state reports around 85% graduating on time. But other data, like from Kids Count, suggested 20% didn't graduate on time in 2021-22. The state has a goal of 90% by 2025, but there's clearly still a chunk of students not making it through in 4 years. So connecting it all, you see these trends in student performance, and there's a definite gap between Oklahoma students and national benchmarks.
It definitely sounds like there are some major hurdles. And one thing we hear constantly is the teacher shortage. How bad is it in Oklahoma?
It's reached, well, crisis levels, honestly. The number of emergency teaching certificates, it's staggering. Back in 2011-12, there were only 32. By July 2024, over 1,700 active ones, and they were on track to issue more than the previous year's total, which was already over 4,600.
4,600. That's just unbelievable. So thousands of people teaching without the standard training. What does that mean for schools?
Well, it means districts are struggling to fill spots, especially in really critical areas like special ed, math, science.
Yeah.
And the reasons, it's a mix. Low pay is a big one, sure, but it's also tough working conditions, class sizes, sometimes student behavior challenges, plus that federal pandemic relief money, the ESR funds, ran out, forcing some districts to cut staff. Having potentially underprepared teachers in classrooms, that's a real worry for student learning, and it just puts more strain on everyone else.
Yeah, it sounds like a vicious cycle. Low pay, tough conditions lead to shortages, which makes conditions tougher. Okay, let's circle back to money for a second, the overall funding. Oklahoma ranks 49th in per pupil spending. What are the implications of that?
Being 49th means Oklahoma invests significantly less per student than almost every other state. That $11,311 figure for 2023-24, it's way below the national average and what neighboring states spend. Now, you might see slightly different numbers depending on who's counting, but the overall picture is consistent, low investment per kid.
And does that low spending affect where the money actually goes within the education budget?
That's a really interesting point. One source, OC Paythink, suggested that Oklahoma actually spends a smaller slice of its education pie on direct classroom instruction compared to the national average, like 58% in Oklahoma versus 62% nationally. So even if the total funding was higher, less of it might be getting to teacher salaries, classroom supplies, that kind of direct student support.
So less money overall and maybe a smaller portion of it going directly to the classroom. That definitely limits resources. Now, we know schools don't exist in a vacuum. What about the bigger picture in Oklahoma, socioeconomic factors?
Yeah, that's crucial context. Oklahoma ranks pretty low in overall child well-being, 46th, according to the 2024 Kids Count data book. And within that, they score low on specifics. Economic well-being is 39th, education itself is 49th, health is 45th. You see this reflected in stats like 20% child poverty rate, high food insecurity, nearly a quarter of kids in 2022, plus 7% of kids lack health insurance.
Those are really tough conditions for kids to thrive in, let alone focus on school. It's hard to learn if you're hungry or worried.
Exactly. And add to that a lower percentage of adults with college degrees compared to other states. It creates this whole web of challenges outside the school walls that directly impacts kids' readiness to learn and succeed in school.
And even though we said the cost of living is lower, that doesn't solve the problem if salaries are also really low, especially for teachers just starting out or with families.
Right, we have to keep coming back to that. Lower cost of living helps, but if the starting salary doesn't even meet a basic living wage estimate for a small family, it's still a major financial strain.
Okay, but amidst all these challenges, Oklahoma has something pretty unique going on with early childhood education, right? Tell us about that.
Yes, that's a definite bright spot. Oklahoma has had universal pre-K for 4-year-olds since way back in 1998. That's quite pioneering.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of work integrating state pre-K with federal Head Start programs. CAP Tulsa's partnerships with public schools are a really good example of that.
So state and federal working together, how's that funded?
It's a mix. There's dedicated state money for the universal pre-K part, federal dollars for Head Start, and sometimes private or philanthropic funds chip in too. It's kind of layered.
And the teachers in these programs, how's their pay?
This is where Oklahoma is actually quite progressive, at least for some early childhood teachers. State law says certified early childhood teachers working in public schools have to get the same pay and benefits as K-12 teachers. They're on the same salary schedule. And organizations like CA Tulsa also report paying their certified lead teachers comparably to public school teachers.
That's really significant, treating pre-K teachers like K-12 teachers in the public system. But does that apply to all early childhood educators in the state?
No, not really. That's the catch. For many other teachers, maybe in non-public school Head Start centers or private childcare, there's still a big wage gap. Salary data suggests they earn quite a bit less. The median wage for the overall ECE workforce in Oklahoma was really low, like around $11 an hour back in 2022.
Okay, so a commendable step with pay parity in public schools, but a wider challenge remains for the rest of the early childhood sector. What impact has this long-term investment in pre-K actually had?
The research, especially out of Tulsa, is pretty positive. Kids who went through the program showed better early reading and math skills, and the effects seemed to last. Better middle school math scores, taking more honors classes later on, lower rates of being held back or being chronically absent, even higher rates of taking AP or IB courses in high school, and significantly higher college enrollment rates. Some analyses even estimate the long-term economic benefits far outweigh what the program costs.
That's really powerful evidence, lasting positive effects. And there was something about it maybe changing teaching in the early grades, too.
Yeah, a kind of hypothesis. The idea is that because so many kids are coming into kindergarten better prepared thanks to pre-K, the kindergarten and early elementary teachers have been able to ratchet up their teaching, expecting more and covering more ground.
Interesting ripple effect. Okay, so Oklahoma has this real strength in pre-K, looking at everything we talked about, the pay issues, outcomes, shortages, but also this pre-K success. What are some potential paths forward, policy-wise?
Well, Oklahoma has tried some things, like the Teacher Empowerment Program, OTEP, for performance pay. Participation's up, but we don't have solid data yet on its impact. Looking around, other states offer ideas. We mentioned Mississippi boosting base pay and seeing more people go into teaching prep. New Mexico made big moves on minimum salaries, too. It seems like it needs to be a sustained strategic effort, focusing on competitive overall pay, not just the starting salary, thinking about career earnings. Plus, support, mentoring. There is that proposal, SB 201, for a $50,000 minimum start. That's something to watch. But again, just starting pay might not be enough long-term for retention if that pay penalty persists.
Right, it's the whole package, the whole career trajectory. What about building on that early childhood success?
Absolutely. Keep strengthening those pre-K programs, maintain the quality, and maybe look for ways to extend that pay parity and professional support to more educators across the entire early childhood sector. Maybe use their quality rating system, the QRIS, to help with that. And you can't ignore those bigger socioeconomic issues. More collaboration across health, human services, education. Trying to improve child well-being overall creates a better foundation for learning.
Okay, so bringing this deep dive toward a close, it really feels like Oklahoma faces this tangled web of challenges: low teacher pay, that big pay penalty, low per student funding, worrying student outcomes, major teacher shortages, all layered onto a tough socioeconomic backdrop.
That sums up the challenges pretty well. But it's crucial we also remember that established strength in universal pre-K. The positive results there are real and well documented.
Definitely. So here's something for you, our listener, to think about as we wrap up. We've seen strong evidence connecting teacher pay and quality early childhood to long-term student success. So considering that, what kind of bold moves, maybe even unexpected policy shifts could Oklahoma make to really leverage that pre-K strength, tackle the pay issues, and maybe break out of these cycles? It really makes you consider how deeply all these pieces, pay, funding, early learning, poverty, are all interconnected, doesn't it?